Well, getting some breaking news. This is regarding the India-US trade deal. India Commerce Secretary on the US trade deal has said that India aims to finalize the deal by March. He again goes on to say that the chief negotiator to visit the US next week, and that's the big news that is breaking for you right now. The Indian chief negotiator will visit the United States of America next week. This at a time when the India-US trade deal is on the cards to get finalized by March this year. And well, my colleague Himanshu is now joining you live. Himanshu, tell us more about how the India-US trade deal is on a fast track, perhaps if I can say motion. It is being planned to sign the deal by March this year, with India's chief negotiating visiting the US next week, Himanshu.
That's right. India and the United States have actually decided to scale up negotiations to finalize a legal agreement to give shape to the in-principle agreement that was reached between Prime Minister Modi and President Donald Trump to have an interim agreement as part of the first tranche of the proposed bilateral trade agreement. And now, for the first time, Commerce Secretary has said categorically that the Indian chief negotiator Darpan Jain will be traveling with a team of officials to Washington next week. And the next round of talks will be held in Washington. And this is part of the larger exercise to stitch an agreement, to finalize an agreement by March. Though there is a rider, Commerce Secretary has said, and I quote him, that this is an effort that we are making, but I will not put a deadline to it. That essentially means that these talks, these new rounds of negotiations to finalize the legal agreement are very sensitive negotiations. And so there should not be any pressure on negotiators to stitch up a legal agreement by March. But of course, both India and the United States have decided to try their best to finalize the legal agreement by March. And that is exactly when India will also try and remind the United States, the Trump administration, that the decision to reduce US tariffs from 25% to 18% is also something that US has to start implementing. India is waiting for President Trump to actually start implementing this decision that he had communicated to Prime Minister Modi.
Right, Himanshu, but like you also mentioned, let's talk about the commitment, the steadfast commitment by both New Delhi and Washington, D.C. Just reiterating for the viewers here, the Commerce Secretary highlighted that with India's chief negotiator visiting the United States of America, the interim deal will be announced, and the US and India will still engage in virtual talks. And this upcoming step will perhaps focus on scaling up the India-US trade deal to be finalized by the end of March.
That's right, Raisha, and that is exactly what the Commerce Secretary has told us. And India is optimistic, considering the fact that there is an in-principle agreement between India and the United States. So it should not be difficult to actually finalize the legal terms of implementing the in-principle decision that has been reached after Prime Minister Modi had a conversation with President Trump. So as part of that agreement, the effort is now being increased to actually finalize the negotiations towards the legal agreement, which is expected next month. But as I said earlier, Commerce Secretary also was little cautious, and he said that this is an effort that we are making, but I will not put a deadline to it. That essentially is an admission to the fact that finalization of any legal agreement related with trade is something which is a very sensitive exercise, and so there should not be pressure on negotiators to work within a specified deadline. Right?
Right, absolutely. The next step right now, of course, with the delegation here in India, the next step is to convert that framework into legally binding text, which we're telling our viewers that India's Commerce Secretary has said that the aim to convert that into legally binding text, they aim to do that by the end of March this year. But Himanshu, tell us more about the contours which are laid out in this US-India trade deal. Of course, we've seen commitment and steadfastness both from New Delhi and Washington, D.C. and how the March 2026 signing, if we are optimistic, if the deal gets through by March 2026, it will not just include tariff cuts, but also cotton imports and the market access, which will all feature in the final text of the India-US trade deal, which we are expecting by March 2026, Himanshu.
Yes, Raisha, you're right. See, officials have told us that so far the negotiations have been held for reducing or removing tariff on around 1,800 products. It's a very long list. Some of the products have been mentioned in the joint statement which was issued a few days ago. And in fact, the joint statement that was released after an in-principle agreement reached between President Trump and Prime Minister Modi basically outlines a framework. Now, as part of this framework, the legal agreement will be staged, and that is exactly what India is now hoping, considering the fact that the commitments that President Trump has made are those commitments that will be reflected. In fact, a senior official told me a short while ago that it is very important for us to understand that the joint statement was issued after an agreement was reached between India and the United States, and clearly that forms the framework under which we have to stage a legal agreement, and that is exactly what India's chief negotiator will do in Washington next week.